That the lure of lucre may lead to nemesis is something we have learned as children through the tales we've read or been told. One such cautionary tale that we are all familiar with is the story of King Midas, who had been granted a wish by a god, and the wish that he asked for was to be able to touch everything that he touched into gold. The name of King Midas is synonymous with greed and foolishness, with the only redeeming aspect of his story being his immense love for his daughter. Most of us know little else about the king. Using historical information, archaeological findings, combining myth and legend, and using her own imagination to fill in the gaps and create a very remarkable narrative, Colleen M's story has crafted The Curse of King Midas. The book has already received a lot of good reviews, and pre-publication it was judged as one of the top 10 finalists for the Claymore Award. Today, I, Ronika Vahi, back with an interview after a really long time, but I'm sure this one's going to be really enjoyable and valuable. I'm here to chat with Colleen M's story about her new book and, of course, her journey as both a writer and a musician. Thank you so much for taking out the time for this interview.
Thank you, Ronica. Thank you for taking the time to have me. I'm excited to be here, and I'm super excited to be your first interview back after so long.
Thank you. So let's start right away. Let's start with the starting of your journey. So when and how did you start writing? Um, what have been the key milestones, and what have been the turning points in this journey of years that you've had?
Oh, thank you for asking. I was not one of those kids who always knew that she wanted to be a writer. When I was very young, the first thing I did was play piano. I was a musician from the beginning. I always liked to write. I used to copy down poems that I liked, and I was a heavy reader. And whenever we had an essay in school, I always did well on it. I preferred essays to multiple choice because I could write well, but I never thought of, really diving into writing until I had graduated college. I got my degree in music education and moved to a different state. And because I moved to a different state, in order to use my education, I would have had to go back to school and get a few more classes. And I wasn't sure I wanted to do that. So I took a little break. And during that break, the writing bug bit me. I went into a store and saw a word processor. That shows you how long ago this was. It was a word processor instead of a computer, but I wanted to, for some reason, I just had to have that word processor, and I took it home that night and started writing stories. And within 3 years, I had published my first story, which was a children's story, and I was paid $10 for it, and I was super excited. I framed that check. I still have it on my desk. And shortly after that, I got my first job as a copywriter for a corporation. So that kind of put me on a new path to have writing as my career, though I continued to play music and also to teach music lessons privately.
Mm-hmm. Right. So you qualified in music. You are still continuing to practice and go to concerts. You perform there, and you also teach music. So first, tell me a little bit about the music, the kind of music you engage in. Also, I'd like to know your opinion on this. What do you believe that when you engage in one art form, does that aid your engagement in another art form? So when you are engaging in music, does it help in any way in your career as a writer?
The answer is yes, but let me get to that. the first question you asked was how I am still involved in music. Is that right? My main instruments, I started on the piano. My mom took me to lessons for years. And then I picked up the French horn in elementary school because I loved how it sounded. And those are my two main instruments. I also play many others. I play the accordion. I do a little bit on guitar. And I also teach trumpet and trombone because they're very similar. But the French horn, I continue to play in local orchestra and pit orchestras. And so that means I'm playing symphony music, but then in the pit orchestras, I'm also playing music for musicals. So live musicals, like we just finished doing The King and I. So I often get to be a part of theater through my music. So as far as whether or not that complements, I would say absolutely, if, at least in my experience, it does. And I interview many other writers for my writing website, Writing and Wellness. And I hear the same from most other writers, that often they will have another artistic pursuit, like if it's not music, it's painting or something of that effect that they are involved in. I think when you're kind of creative, some of those creative tendencies come out in other places. But the way that I find music helpful to me as a writer is, number one, I use it a lot when I'm writing an actual scene. So for the Curse of King Midas, for example, I did some research and found out some of the instruments they used back in those days, and got onto YouTube. One of them is what they call an oud. It's O-U-D. It's a stringed instrument. Are you aware of that instrument?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool. So anyway, I went out to YouTube and found some oud music, and it was perfect for several of the scenes that I was writing. So I would have it playing while I was writing the scene to kind of help me set the scene in my mind. And then being able to go and play in these groups is also really good for me, because it gets me away from the computer and out among other people, since writing is so isolated. And I also think if you're trained as a musician, it kind of helps you to make sure that your writing also flows, because you read it aloud and you can kind of hear if there are issues in the prose. And I think that helps you to create better prose when you're setting up settings or dialogue or that sort of thing, if your ear is sort of attuned. Are you a musician at all, Ronica?
No, I used to dance, right? So I was involved in
Oh,
music in some way, but
well, that's
I
cool.
don't play any instrument.
But dancing is a talent too, for sure.
Yes. Yes, so I enjoy dancing. I am not pursuing it currently. Okay, so yeah, I think that's true. There are a number of artists who engage in, multiple art forms, and I'm sure they complement, right? Because they, it's like you become more creative the more creative things
I think
you
so,
indulge in.
yes.
Yes.
And I think when you're spending time with one, it almost helps you to generate the other.
Yes.
I will notice after a time playing music, I'll actually feel more creative on the writing and vice versa. So I don't think it's good to be stuck in one all the time, because you can kind of start to go stale. And there is another connection to this story in particular that has to do with music.
Yes. I actually wanted to ask you this, since you just mentioned that, one helps you in generating the other. So your stories, right? All of the books that you've written, the fiction books, they're all very different from one another, right? The plots are entirely different. So for this particular one, The Curse of King Midas, what was the kind of inspiration that you had for writing this kind of a story, for taking up this genre?
Thank you so much for asking that, because it was totally different for me. Before that, like you say, I was the two novels before this were what they call supernatural thrillers or literary ghost stories. And those were ones that just kind of came to me. I don't outline my stories beforehand usually. I usually have a character that comes to mind and an ending, and then I'll just kind of go with it. And so I was just kind of following the creative muse for each of my books beforehand. But for this one, it was entirely different. There was a friend of mine that is in the orchestra with me, who is a very fine trumpet player and also a music composer. and he directs many of the pit orchestras for the musicals that we do. So he has had in mind the dream of writing his own musical. And
Okay.
so he has studied musicals very carefully. And he came to me after he read one of my last books, Lorena's Gift. He had read it and he liked it. And he came to me and asked me if I would be interested in writing the story of King Midas, because he said he was interested in perhaps doing a musical about
Okay.
King Midas. But he said the best musicals are based on books. If you think about it, the one we just did, King and I, was based on a book by someone who had actually gone to that area.
Okay.
And Phantom of the Opera is based on a book. And so he was telling me that the best musicals are based on books, and wondered if I would consider trying this story. I was in between stories at that time. It was a good time to think about a different type of idea. So I thought, well, I'll give it a try. I don't know, but let me try it. And so I started researching the story and was just ecstatic to find out that King Midas was not only the character in the Greek myth that we all are familiar with, but he was also a real person. He
Yes.
actually ruled the kingdom of Phrygia in 700 BC. And when I discovered that, it just opened up this whole new realm that I could play with creatively, to be able to combine the Greek myth and then the history of the real person, which are actually quite different when you dive into it.
Yes.
King Midas being the king of Phrygia kingdom, he did have close relationships with the Greeks, but they're not really sure why the Greeks wrote that myth about him. They wonder if maybe because his kingdom was very well off, he did very well, his capital city was very rich, that maybe that's why they did this, touch of gold myth,
Yes.
but we're not really
Yes. Maybe.
sure where that came from.
Yes, yeah, I think that must be where that expression, the Midas touch, yes, may have come from, right? Okay, so see, you have used the existing myths, legends, and the historical accounts and archaeological evidences that were found. Um, uh, I think in the 19th century, there were some new evidences also discovered. So, and then of course, you've added fantasy, you've added your own imagination. Like, there are some scenes, right, where um, there's this role of a role of gods. One particular scene I really enjoyed reading, right, which is towards the start of the book, is where those three scholars are in that room. Xander is trying to bring the dark goddess, right, and ask her some questions. So, that was really enjoyable to read. But obviously, that is something that you've added. So, what was the process like of creating this kind of a narrative where you are mixing, let's say, three types of things, right? So, yeah, what was the process of creating this?
I'm so glad that you enjoyed that scene, and thank you for saying that, because those three characters I added on purpose, the king's three advisors,
Yes.
because most musicals, if you watch most musicals, there are some humorous characters in the story. There
Yes.
has to be some lightness somewhere. And my stories tend to be serious for the most part. They deal with serious themes. But I knew that if this was eventually going to be a musical, of course, it grew into much more than that as I wrote it. But I knew if that was to be the case, that it would need to have, some kind of fun characters in there. And that's where those three came from. But the process for me, I did a bunch of research on who the real person was. And the University of Pennsylvania is still, to this day, doing an archaeological dig at his capital city of Gordium. So they are still revealing pictures, and they're still learning more all the time, which is fascinating. But I did a bunch of research on him, and also on King Sargon II, who was also a real character, and they were real kind of enemies at that time for a while. So he is one of the main antagonists in the story. He was also a real person. So a lot of the story is based strongly in the real history. But then, of course, we have the mythological events that he does wish for the touch of gold, and what happens after that is similar to the myth. As far as the gods go, as I was looking at the myth, the god that King Midas originally gets the gift from is Dionysus.
Yes.
And I kind of felt like I wanted to have more of a motivation for why would this god do this to this person?
Yes.
Because somehow, I mean, I'm thinking the god must have known what this would do to this poor king. And so I thought, if there was a god that would do this, maybe this person would have a reason to want to curse the king this way. And so I was looking at motivation very strongly, because for me, in the myth, King Midas' main motivation is that he's greedy. That
Yes.
wasn't enough motivation for me to create a really good story out of. I wanted something that had more grit to it and that would raise the stakes more toward the end. So
Yes.
in my story, King Midas's main motivation is revenge.
Yes.
And we have the goddess in there. She had to have a motivation for why he would end up being cursed this way. So her motivation, I don't want to give it all away, but hers is
Yes.
also quite serious. I turned Dionysus into a female god, Denisha, and then there's Katya who's involved. And actually, in the real history of Phrygia, they had gods that they worshipped.
Yes.
And one of the specific ones they worshipped is actually going to show up in book 2. But in this book, I stuck with Denisha, who's an offshoot of Dionysus, and then brought in Katya, who's the one you were talking about that they wanted to summon.
Yes. Yes.
And she has a bone to pick with Midas. So there's a reason why she sets everything in motion. It just helped me to make it more of an interesting and fun and good story, because there's motivations that are a little bit,
Yes.
that matter a little bit more.
Yes. Yes, so you've created this kind of revenge story, and you've given a different dimension, let's say multiple dimensions to the kind of to King Midas, right? Because we have like just this just these couple of aspects that we're all familiar with, right? So one, his greed and foolishness; the other would be his love for his family, right? So we see other aspects here. So just for information's sake, if you could outline what was the real King Midas like as per what information is yet available, and how much of your book is based in history?
The real King Midas, they don't know a lot about him yet. They are still searching. They haven't found his tomb. They found his father's tomb. They have not found his. And so all they have is a few writings from the neighborhood kingdom of Assyria, which is the one ruled by King Sargon II, and a little bit from the Greeks, who wrote many hundreds of years later. So all that we really know about him was that he was successful, that his kingdom did thrive, that the capital city of Gordium was right in the middle of the trade routes between East and West. And we're talking modern day Turkey is where all this took place. So we know he did well. We know he was a good king. And there is a really large monument built to him about, I think they said about 2 hours south of Gordium, that has a dedication on it to the great King Midas, leader of the army or something like that. And it's just huge. If you see pictures, I mean, the people are this big and the monument is this big, and it's just this huge rock. And here it is, 3,000 years later, and it's still there. So we know that he did well, that his people did well, and that they seemed to think well of him because of this sort of monument that they built. So that's all we really know. And based on that, I kind of felt that there had to be more to him than just being this shallow, greedy guy. And so I wanted to build more depth into him. And I did pull a lot from the idea that he was very devoted to his children.
Okay, thanks for sharing this information about him. So see, your works have, apart from this one also, your works have been really appreciated, and you've also written books about the process of writing, right? So, and you have a YouTube channel on which you uh, guide writers on how to navigate this world of um, writing and publishing, right? So if you could give here some tips that can be helpful for people who are just starting out.
Sure. Yeah. If you're first starting out, the main thing that I talk about in my website for writers and on my YouTube channel um, is I'm dealing with things that we struggle with as we exist as writers, as we try to create writing careers, and we go from trying really hard to write this story and become a good writer, and then trying to get published, and then we finally reach this dream of being published, and the book goes out there and nobody buys it, and so we have to learn how to market it, and then so we try to learn how to market it, but then the market changes and what we're supposed to do to market it changes. And so, I mean, it's a very difficult road
Mhm.
in many
Yes.
ways. And so I try to encourage writers on how to stay the course, on how not to let self-doubt, get them down, or to let discouragement get them down, because it's very easy for all those things to happen. If you are, you become a doctor, you get your training, you become a doctor, you get a job, you get paid, you help
Yes.
people, all those rewards start coming back to you. When you're a writer, there really is no, you can go get a degree for writing, but a lot of times, there's a debate as to how helpful that is. You
Yes.
can't get a degree and go out and then start becoming paid to write your stories. That's not how it works usually. So it's a road that you have to figure out how you can go along it your best way. And I would say for young writers to really focus on why you're doing this. Why do
Yes.
you want to write? And if you are writing because you're hoping for lots of money or worldly accolades or those kind of things, which we all dream about that, and that's
Yes.
okay. But if that is your main goal, you're probably going to be disappointed. Doesn't mean it won't ever happen, but it's probably going to take you longer than you think. And you're going to have to learn more than you think. And you're going to have to work harder than you think. So it helps to ask yourself, what's the most important to me? And I try to remind writers about how beneficial just writing is. I
Yes.
can't I can't say enough about this because writing has done so much for me as a person. If I look back to when I started writing and today, and I hope in the future, I learned so much. I have become I think a broader person because of what writing has taught me. Writing has taken me many places that I would have never gone to go to workshops. I've met people I never would have met. And as you continue to become better and you learn and you keep trying and you overcome these discouragements, you just build a person that you typically can be very proud of because you overcome a lot of difficulties to get where you are. So do you want to become a writer for the outside reasons or for the inside reasons? And if you have really good inside reasons, then absolutely you should do it. Do not doubt yourself, trust yourself. If you really just love writing stories and you want to do that, then I say go for it 100%. Don't doubt yourself. Everybody has talent. Some people question whether they have talent. I have found over the years, everybody has talent. That isn't it. It's whether or not you have the grit to stick with it and keep producing those stories. Because when you hold this book in your hands, there's no feeling like that. It feels wonderful. And even if all the other things don't come to you, there's still a huge accomplishment there. So decide what you want. And if what you really want is just to write and get better, then absolutely go for it. If you want to earn lots of money and fame, try something else.
Okay. I think very sound advice there. Okay, I'm really interested in knowing one thing. Say you are writing novels, you are a freelance writer, you have a YouTube channel, you'd conduct workshops, you go to perform at concerts, and you also teach music, right? And then you have all of your hobbies, right, of exploring stuff and enjoying with your animals. So how are you managing your time well to pack in all of this?
That's a really good question, and a question I think all writers have these days. I'm sure I'm going to turn that question around to you in a minute, Ronica, because you probably have some advice too. But for me, it is a constant checking in with my priorities, because in today's world, the only way that we can manage time is to choose how we spend it. And we have to consciously choose. If we don't, then the time will fly out the window as we're scrolling our Facebook feed, or, watching a television show, or, just deciding we're tired, so we take, a 2-hour nap or something. The time can fly away from us very easily if we aren't regularly checking in and saying, what is most important for me to be doing right now? And for me, I have to do this frequently, because there's always new projects happening. Like, we just finished performing King and I, so I knew for a while that I was going to be involved in that, and that some of my other things would have to wait. So then when that finishes, then I'm picking up, okay, what project now becomes the priority? And then how can I rearrange my schedule to make that work? And in process of rearranging my schedule, I also have to consider, when are my high energy times? When am I most likely to be able to dive into a new novel or dive into a new nonfiction book? When am I going to be able to do a YouTube video, in with a quality way that I want to? So 2 things: choosing specifically what your priorities are, and understanding when you do that some of your stuff's going to fall by the wayside. I would love to be able to produce videos more often than I do, but I know that I can't do that without having my writing not get done, or having something else fall by the wayside. So it's a constant, like every couple of weeks checking in and saying, what's most important? Am I getting this done, or do I need to rearrange? And I think having like 3 main priorities, as long as you get to those, then you feel good, is a good way to approach it, because otherwise your list is this long and there's always something on it that's not done, and then you feel bad because you didn't get it done. That doesn't work very well. So 3 main priorities, as long as you're getting those done, you're feeling good, and you just consistently revisit that to set those. Do you have any tips yourself?
See, I have what I've done very recently, and it's working for me, is that I have created an hour-wise schedule for myself, right? And that this is my time for this, and this is my time for this, right? So which things which are very important for me to do, right? Like, for instance, my classes, right? Obviously they are at fixed times, right? But all of those things are properly scheduled, and my other important tasks as well. So I've scheduled them as per the time of the day, and I'm not shifting that. So that is helping me. Otherwise, the tendency is to procrastinate. You always want to just watch 2 more reels on Instagram, right? So yes, so that is what I'm doing. And then I have segregated my hours this way, that this is work time, and then this is the time of the day when I'm going to totally relax, right? So that could be reading, or that could be scrolling on like my social media feeds, or it could just be watching a movie. And then so I've segregated those hours, right, instead of just relaxing when I feel like it. Because the tendency is that if I don't have a class right now, and the slot is free, so I'll just laze about. But instead of that, now I try to finish my time, right, so that I've dedicated time for enjoyment and family, and like the rest of the time for work. So that is sticking to that kind of schedule is helping me manage things better.
I'm glad that you brought up scheduling relaxation time, because I think that's super important too. If you don't do that, it's so easy to burn out. And so that's a really good point you made. And also I like that you said you actually have to schedule it. You have to write it down, because like you say, if you don't, then it's probably not going to happen. For me, instead of writing out, several weeks ahead of time, I often will the night before say, what's my top 3 priorities for the next day that I really want to be sure and get done. And that also helps me to set a mindset for the next day. But yeah, those are all really good points.
Yeah, right. So like creating a to-do list, right? Like this is something that, and you can, I think, do it priority wise. That's right. That's even better. That, this is high priority, so this is something I'll do right at the
Right.
start of the day, right? And then
Yeah, I have some
go
things
as
on my to-do
priorities
list.
increases.
Right. I have some things on my to-do list that have been there for months because they're lower priority. So I want
Same.
to do them someday, but I haven't got to them yet. So they keep carrying over to the bottom of the next list.
Yes, I think the same happens with everybody. But then we all have limited time, so we have to choose, right? And then we have to be practical also. Sometimes we really want to do something, but then just because we want to do it might not be the best thing for us, really, in the short term as well as in the long term. So
Right.
that focus needs to be there on work and family.
Yes.
So okay, and okay, so what are your plans going ahead? So what is the next destination that you're eyeing on your journey?
That's kind of a trick question for me right now. For writing, obviously, I'm working on book 2 in the Midas
Okay,
series. I
yes,
didn't know that was going to be a series initially, but because the book 1 ends with a satisfying ending, I
yes.
think. But there were some unanswered questions left with some of the characters, and many of my beta readers were asking me, what happens
Mhm.
to this person? And so it kind of naturally led into a book 2. And right now I'm planning 3 books for that series. On the nonfiction side, I've been toying around with some ideas. I lately surveyed my readers on writingandwellness.com, and the same issues that writers continually come up against came up again, which is productivity and procrastination. And it's interesting that you mentioned those. So I'm toying around right now with potentially doing a project on procrastination. I touched on that a little bit in my book Overwhelmed Writer Rescue, but it was kind of interesting because my mom read that book, and she's my first reader for all my books. And she said on the part about procrastination that ended up helping her a lot because my stepdad tends to procrastinate. And she learned from that book how to help him to get things done. Like one of the main things he procrastinates on is taxes. He doesn't want to, I mean, who wants to do taxes? Nobody does. And so she has helped him with that based on what I wrote there. So that's kind of stayed with me. And I think now I might be tackling that in a bigger way
Yes.
coming up. It's an idea that's percolating in my mind. And I'm not sure about other things. I'm toying with some other ideas because I'm kind of in an interesting place in my career right now, my freelance career. The economy struggles that we've had lately and the rise of AI have changed the landscape for freelance writers. And for instance, one of the clients that I had that was a really big client recently took their projects away to strictly give them to AI. So I think there's a lot of businesses that are looking at that. There's problems with that, obviously, because AI still
Yes.
has, you can't just produce something with AI. It still isn't as good as it should be. But it's getting there more and more every day. And so the demand for the type of content writing that I have done my whole life for 25 some years is changing. I see the industry changing. So as far as where I will go with my career next, I'm not really sure. Obviously, I still have some clients that I'm working with, but I'm thinking about perhaps some other ways to adjust to that change.
Yes. Yeah, I think this is something important that you brought up, because this is something that everybody has been, you know, feeling tensed about, right? A lot of writers, particularly people who are doing freelance work in content writing. So, but yes, so let's see where things go. But yes, currently AI, is not as good as a human writer can be. I mean, it's at least not as creative, right? And then sometimes you also find certain I think grammatical errors, or
Yeah.
you may feel that the
Flowery
word
writing.
choices are the word
Yes,
choices are
yes.
not that apt. Yes. And so best of luck for the next things that you're planning, and I would really like to see your work on procrastination. I think that is something everybody needs, right?
Well,
particularly
thank
with
you.
this particularly with this sort of onslaught of social media, and particularly Instagram. It's like, once you're on Instagram, you just cannot, just close off the app. You just want to go in.
Well, and that is because they want it that way. I mean,
Yes.
the designers are making it so it's harder and harder for you to leave it because they
Yes.
want you to stay. And so, yeah, we're kind of in a fight there. We're we're kind of in a battle, I mean, because it's fun to be on. For many writers, it's important to be on it. But then you do have to be careful because you can get sucked in so very easily. And then of course, it's always easy just to pick up the phone and scroll something than it is to actually go face the blank page, And so there's that we have to manage with too. I'm thank you for saying that, because the more I hear people say that, the more I feel like this may be the next thing that I will do. One of the things that I'm interested in and researching right now is the different types of procrastinators.
Yes.
That there are different type. I mean, just like you can have different personalities, there, like if maybe you're introverted or extroverted, there are different types of procrastinators. And I think if you kind of knew what type fits you, that it can help you to target more the types of solutions that will work for you. So that's something that I'm looking into. Yeah.
Yeah. So does that relate to the types? Meaning, does that relate to the reasons why people procrastinate? Like, what is their mind?
Yeah.
It depends on the mindset.
Yeah, because one person, for example, one type is the dreamer procrastinator.
Yeah.
So if you're a dreamer procrastinator, one of the reasons you may procrastinate is because this dream you have, let's say, of becoming a best-selling writer, is so lofty in your mind that when it actually comes to doing the practical thing of writing, you don't feel up to it. You don't, okay, so today I'm too tired, or I'm not sharp enough, or I know whatever I write is not going to be equal to this dream that I have.
Yes.
So it's easier to put it off because of that. Other types of procrastinators may be the perfectionist procrastinator. So the perfectionist procrastinator wants to make sure everything they do is perfect, so they never get to the next step because they're always afraid that this isn't quite, there yet. So there's different types of procrastination that I think if you knew kind of where you were, obviously people may have a combination of some of those, but I think some of them will rise to the top as being, oh yeah, that's really me. And if you can identify that, then you could potentially address it better than perhaps just general procrastination information. Recommendations is, to tackle it first thing in the morning, give yourself a schedule. I mean, there's some very generic recommendations for how to get past procrastination, but I have found that for many people, those don't work. Yes. So I think if you kind of know a little bit more about what's behind your specific style, that perhaps you could find a solution that would work better. That's my hope anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that will be helpful for many people, right? Because everybody, it's not just people engaged in the creative fields, everybody struggles with that, right? If it's work that they cannot procrastinate, like they have set hours to work, it's something else, right? Something personal which may be important, or some side hustle they want to start and give it a try. Maybe they try to procrastinate that. So like everybody is doing it. So I think it can be a really helpful resource for people. So best of luck for that project.
You're motivating me. Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to reading book 2 of the King Midas series. So yes, so this is book 1. Anything else that you'd like to talk about? Anything else that you'd like to share, or any message that you'd like to give to people watching this?
Probably the main thing would be to please try the book. It is on sale right now. The ebook is, and I would love for them to give it a try just to see if they like it. I think it offers something different than a lot of other books out there do. It is in the historical fantasy genre, but I think many people I've found are interested in the King Midas myth. Because most of us knew about him from that childhood story. And so being able to find out these other things about him, that he was this real person, and to imagine the story that perhaps his life was, it offers something different, I think, than many other stories do. So I think it's unique in that way, and I would love for people to try it. I did a presentation recently at a bookstore here in my town where I told a lot more about the real King Midas and the archaeological dig that they're doing right now. And the gentleman I told you about that is the composer who had the idea in the first place, came to that presentation and told us that there was going to be a musical. So I don't know if, he's a very busy person, and it is going to, whether he will actually, be able to do that, because that's a huge undertaking. If he does, I will be helping with the script. But we will see if that happens. That would be super awesome. I would love that.
Yes. Yes. Again, best of luck to you for that as well. And thank you so much for taking out the time for this. And for everybody who's watching this, do check out my review on The Curse of King Midas. It's there on my book review blog, ronikavahi.blogspot.com. The exact link you will find in the description box. There are also the Amazon links for the book. The book is already available in hardcover and paperback, and the audiobook is going to be out soon. So if you prefer audiobooks, maybe you can wait for that for the time being. But do add this to your list. And if you enjoyed this interview, please do like, share, comment, and subscribe, and do check out the other interviews on this channel. Also, I'm putting on the end screen the channel trailer for my other channel, Ronika Vahi's Academy, on which I teach right from the basics, English and Sanskrit, through both of them, through Hindi. So please do check that out as well. And thank you so much for watching this. Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you, Ronika.